Hi, it's Michael Reddy. This is a Family Energetics for evening. It's the last one until the fall. So, hi, people. We're going to pick up where we left off, more or less, in last week. And who did we just catch here? That's Marie. Hi, Marie.
Hello.
We're just starting.
Hi.
Okay. So, I took you last time through about half of the presentation for the ASAP conference, which happened in San Antonio a month ago. And I'm going to review just a little bit. We were talking about 4 nested levels or scales of human groups. And most of you, I think, are pretty familiar with these: organizations, generational family, birth family, developmental family if it's not your birth family, and this inner family that I've started talking about, which I will remind you goes back to Schwartz's internal family systems therapy, where he points out, and it's where I first really got the idea, or dawned on me, that the inner family is really a very clear response to the developmental and ancestral families. I mean, the persona that exists if you go in and begin to isolate them as people, which is part of the work I do, you'll see that they spring from the developmental and ancestral family. Their loyalties to, reactions against, typically they're either, in line with somebody or busy rejecting somebody. And that's part of this whole extension of family constellations. I mean, and it's not mine. There's a guy in Australia, I can't think of his name. He writes paragraphs 20 pages long, so he's very hard to read. I can't think of his name. Who wrote a book on working with inner families in a constellation manner, must be 6-7 years ago. So these are our levels. I remind you that I'm talking about a cascade of damage, of trauma that propagates through these levels. The overall, unifying insight here is that on all these levels, trauma does the same thing, that it disconnects the unconscious social group distributed intelligence. Okay? And I'm talking about a group even inside of you, all right? A group of personality parts. It disconnects that from the conscious, rational intelligence that's busy talking and thinking and having narratives of autobiographical narratives and things like that. So it puts a little stop sign there on all levels. That's all that really changed there, was it breaks that bond. I think it's fascinating that this is the same thing going on, that this generalization exists. I love it, in fact. We look back at these dolls. If we think of the top half as conscious intelligence and the bottom half of the dolls as subconscious social intelligence, this is a picture of what happens. In some cases, some parts are still connected, but many parts are disconnected. This is the terrible migraine fade constellation, in which the tragic grief and loss of Don's uncle, his father's older brother, falling through the stair rail, never got mourned, didn't get dealt with. The external rational, what was going on the external level of the family was anger and silence and bitterness. That is to say, they were talking about things that had nothing to do with what was going on over here. And I believe I took you also to this slide. I think we talked about this, right? You assume that Don's uncle, his father's older brother, we know that this happened around Halloween, and he's dressed. Imagine he's dressed as a clown. This is an imagining now. He's dressed as a clown, and he's wearing his grandfather's army boots. Sorry, he's wearing. That's really a mistake. He's wearing his father's army boots. That's right. That's right. He's wearing his father's army boots as clown shoes and stumbles. And his father invaded Iwo Jima, has all sorts of survivor guilt and, guilt from people from all the savagery that went on there. That's what's going on in his father's unconscious. So it's Don's grandfather. So sorry, okay, as long as we think it's Don's grandfather. So the text is right. I just was confused about the reference. The military culture is not going to talk about any of this stuff, especially back then. So we're looking at a father whose survivor guilt probably is being played out in the life of his oldest son. That is to say, his oldest son is atoning. And this passes then on down to Don because of the thing that happened to the family on the basis of this. So there's a picture of of really three generations. But you can see there that again, it's the same thing. What's going on in the military culture, what's going on in grandfather, which is forget it and move on, what's going on in the 6-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old who falls through the stairway he's carrying his father's survivor guilt. Of course, in this case, he doesn't even know he's doing it. He's not really old enough to have that consciousness. And then we have this echoing all the way down into Don. Okay, so couple of, the bad news here is that trauma is everywhere and it's on all these levels, and we really have to heal it on all of them to fix things. And frankly, I don't see that we're even making a start at it. All the trouble in the external world, all the power struggles, the wars, Donald Trump, all of this stuff, the resurgence of right-wing, nationalistic, jingoistic ideas and feelings, all that really has its source in what happens when kids grow up in families. And if the families are being traumatized by the institutions around them, then they're not going to be able to raise the kids well. You can see what I mean. That's the bad news. The good news, though, is that we really have a single root source for all of our troubles. Now, that may seem strange to say that, but I believe it. I think that solutions to many, many of our other troubles would become possible if we were not, all of us, so badly traumatized on so many levels, just by existing in the human form at this point on this planet. The good news is we have a single source, a single place to look, and it behaves similarly on all these levels. It does the same thing. And similar low-tech, accessible, inexpensive tools like energy psychology and constellations, they do work. I mean, practitioners need to be skilled. They need to have some empathy and the ability to hold space for the people they're working with. They need to know something about how trauma works and how it gets resolved. But we have tools. It's a strange picture to my mind. Anybody got anything they want to say about that? Okay. So, point to remember, leftover loyalties to unresolved issues in your family of origins past are shaping your life, and unfortunately, too often for the worse at this point. The same is true looking downstream for your children and grandchildren. So the big point is clear what you carry if you want to help them. And I think all this, so much of this trouble is because we do not understand and deal with our group intelligence. We you know, since the Enlightenment, we're on this track of we're individuals. And especially in the United States, especially in North America. We see ourselves mostly as localized individual left brain intelligences. We've downgraded and denigrated the subconscious, emotional, body-based collective intelligence that actually create and stream the world to a rather pompous and isolated left brain. Okay. What happens matters less than how it's processed. Abuse or tragedies adequately grieved, assimilated, and eventually accepted, they don't leave negative traces. And I say eventually. Sometimes it can take years to do this. And then, of course, constellations come into the picture. So even after people are dead and gone, we now have the ability to, quote, fix, unquote, this. We do. Because we can sort out the fates. We can give back, we can, you know, we can help. What's his name? The Dutch shaman who does constellations. It's too bad to be unable to remember names. Dan. Yeah, Dan somebody.
Dan Van Koop.
Kampenhout or something like that.
Yeah.
He basically says that after people, and I think there's truth in this, and I read the same thing someplace else recently. He says that when people die, they, you know, their physical and their etheric bodies are gone, but their astral and mental bodies don't necessarily dissolve yet. Now, time is weird and funky in the spiritual world, so I don't know how to address that really. But if they're entangled, they're still around. And Van Kampenhout says that they're essentially kind of floating around, or some portion of their conscious awareness that survives is floating around in the astral. And what we do when we're representing in a constellation is we lend the astral and mental body of the ancestor our etheric and physical bodies. And in that blending, we are able to help them move and change things that alone in the astral they could not change. And I think that's a neat idea. It's a beautiful idea, really. Okay, so this is where we were last time, and now we're moving into new stuff. I'll come back to this. So here's kind of the main thing that I've worked out over the last 4 years. And to tell you what it is, I need to define some things. So I want to define bulky and slim constellations. So slim means minimal in this context. And the minimal constellation really is a Gestalt 2-chair. Everybody know what I mean by that? It's like we got one person popping between two chairs, typically talking to another personality part. So outer person is talking to 6-year-old or something like this. And they move back and forth between the chairs, and I'll be saying more about this. Or there could be 3 chairs, or 3 pillows, just 3 positions. I think it's important to move people around in space when you do this. I'll talk about that more later. Then we get into 4 to 6 people or objects in some kind of pattern. We've got a more full-blown constellation, and then we get into some, bulky workshop constellations where we've not only got, 6, 7, 10, 12 people on the floor in the constellation, but we have a circle of people. Those are bulky. There's no value judgment involved in slim or bulky. It's just, it's a question of how much you've got going on. Okay? Now, interestingly enough, the same thing is true about energy psychology. So the original, if you look down at the bottom, the original tapping algorithms, George Diamond and Callahan and one other guy, they're very complicated. So for a specific type of trauma or something, there's a recipe. And the recipe says tap 5 times on this point and then go over here and tap 20 times on this point and then go down here. And those recipes, some of them were long. They had 15 or 20 parts. So that is the bulky. That's bulky. You can't do that without a list to follow. You can't teach it to people easily. And the first big simplification that came along was EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. Gary Craig figured out that you could tap on the ends of the meridians and follow a certain formula and get in mind the issue that you are working with. So even though I feel like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, even so, I deeply love and fully accept myself. Reminder phrase, reminder phrase, reminder phrase, reminder phrase, and so on. That's simpler. It's still a little bulky. Later, we've got Dan Benor put EMDR, which is my movements like this, together with EFT, and experimented a lot and found out that basically he could do pretty much the same thing tapping on just alternate sides of the body. Didn't matter where you tapped, wow. Right? Tapas Fleming created the Tapas acupressure technique, which looks like this. I don't know why that works. I've looked in a couple of places, but you can do something similar with this. Then there's all of Donna Eden's stuff, all of her energy medicine stuff. What I'm picking out now are ones that are simple. Like this is an easy thing to show someone. You can demonstrate it in a second. Put one finger here, another one here, and another one here. Hold them, think about your issue for a couple of minutes. Take a deep breath, write down what you feel, do it again, and you'll see things change. Go ahead, Linda.
What points are those, Michael? Because you're on the tiniest little 1 inch by 1 inch screen, and I couldn't quite see. Is it just above your eyebrows? And
it's right in this, just above your eyebrows, right in the center.
Okay.
And then you grab the upper bridge of your nose where it comes into your eyes with your thumb and your third finger. So you're just holding these 3. So these 2 fingers are up out of the way.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
And then finally, you can tap single meridian points. And I know I was supposed to find out for Linda, I was supposed to remind myself of I know this is like anger, and this is to calm down the triple warmer, which is your fight or flight. And so this one is probably the gallbladder meridian, and I didn't look it up. I apologize. It's easy to look up. But you can still just tap on a single point. for given, because the meridians govern certain emotions. So you notice we've gone from bulky to slim here too. Make sense? So now all we got to say is bulky constellations like slim EP and bulky EP like slim constellations.
Oh, sorry, could I just quickly say something? When you said about hitting the left side and the right side, isn't that kind of alerting both sides of the brain?
Yes.
So that when you're thinking about whatever this issue is, it's all bringing it to the fore for both sides of the brain,
Yeah.
and it processes it somehow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, if we go back a ways, hang on. If we go back here, wait a minute. Yeah. All of these techniques, EMDR is about moving your eyes back and forth like this. And this is, you know, which is rebranded as transformational holistic repatterning. And both of those are just, all these acronyms are crazy, but all of these try to keep both sides of the brain active. They use the body to keep both sides of the brain active. Why are they doing that? Because they don't want the hippocampus to shut down when these unhappy feelings come across. They want it.
Sorry, so you can do that with your knees as well. You can just hit each knee,
Yes,
each
ma'am.
knee. Yeah. Oh, good.
Yes, ma'am. You can sit. You're sitting at a banquet table and you're very nervous and upset because you got to speak in 10 minutes, and you can be sitting there going tap 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 tap. I'm not kidding. I've done that. I'm not, because I was nervous, but it's the TWR. This alternate. It's very cool because you can do it with anything. You can be laying in bed and just wiggle your right toe, wiggle your left toe, wiggle your right toe. Do you understand me? Anything that will selectively cause that you do, that targets, you know, alternate sides of your body, will help keep your limbic system online, which keeps these guys, instead of turning from, you know, instead of this stuff turning into more trauma, right? It keeps both of them online, and what you get is witnessing, acceptance, cognitive shifts, emotional releases. So thank you for that question.
Also, you know, when somebody gets a shock, the first thing they tend to do is just stop, don't they?
I'm
Your
sorry.
eyes open wide,
When
and
they-
sometimes your mouth might drop open, but you just sort of stop, don't you, when you get a shock?
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that would be, that would perhaps be why people don't process it properly, as you know, as well as the brain. You know, when you freeze, I suppose you sort of freeze, don't you?
Yes, you do.
Yeah,
You do.
but even physically, you just stop moving.
Yes, ma'am, you do.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we? Okay, so let's look at this a little bit. So if you got a big constellation, if you got a real bulky constellation, a workshop full of people, and various, you know, 7, 8, 10 people on the floor in the constellation, you have a question about attention. The power of that group, the power of that workshop and that constellation to hold its resonance with the unseen, with the deeper realities, depends on attention, intention, and some level of emotional importance. So you don't have time in a constellation like that. You need to preserve the dramatic flow. And if you're a good facilitator, you're watching not only, you know, you're using what I call the butterfly method. You're keeping an eye on everybody who's on the floor alternately, checking in quickly. And you're also kind of watching the group. You're watching the people sitting on the sidelines because it's their attention and their intention to be loving and helpful, as well as the emotional importance of whatever it is we're dealing with. That is what drives this connection to this non-local, atemporal, Akashic records, or whatever the hell it is. All right? So you can't be teaching somebody EFT. Now, maybe by chance they know it. Okay, that's another thing. But you can walk up to someone and say, well, maybe could you just do this for a couple of minutes, and I'll be back in a minute. Just do that. You don't really have to explain it at all. Or what I've started doing in some cases is, you know, when the ancestors come up behind and put their hands on the shoulders, you can ask the person, say, would it be all right if the ancestor tapped alternately on your shoulders? And now you've suddenly got TWR running on this person coming from an ancestral source. Nobody has to know what it's about. You don't have to explain anything. And you're not going to interrupt, you know, the dramatic flow of the constellation. You're not going to, you can keep the whole system engaged. Okay? You can use it on clients, the simple things, breathe, tap, tap. You can use it on clients or representatives who are starting to get overwhelmed. But my point here is to keep it slim. Don't get involved in some big application of EFT to one person in a large constellation, because you're going to lose everybody else, right? Their attention and their intention is going to flag. And with that, down the tubes will go your resonance. On the other hand, if you've got a slim constellation, if you've got, say, a one-on-one situation, and these I've had a lot of, where I've got a client and I've got that client moving between 1, 2, 3, you know, I've got an outer person talking maybe to 1 or 2 parts, talking to I'll give you an example in a second, talking to a 6-year-old and a 12-year-old self or something like that. Since there's only one person, since there's nobody in the other 2 chairs, when the client turns into the 6-year-old, you can spend a whole session on the 6-year-old. You can do very bulky energy psychology procedures on the 6-year-old directed at exactly the 6-year-old's issues, not the outer person's issues and not the 12-year-old's issues. And those 3 are not always the same. That's the big point. When I'm doing that, I will, however, still be bouncing back and forth. So if say most of a session, most of an hour is spent on the 6-year-old who's tapping on being abused, say, actually that's right down here. All right, let me hold that off and so that's clear, right? That's the rule of thumb. Okay.
So when the person moves from one chair to another, do they step out of whoever they've just been?
Yeah, I'll be talking about that the rest of the time now.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. But you're right.
Yeah.
So let's go back to this picture here. We've got a I think I talked about this last time already. We've got a 45-year-old client, sexually abused at 6, enraged at 14 after puberty. So, you know, the 6-year-old is kind of like this dog that I call Fluffy, and the 13-year-old is like this one, and the outer person. And the thing is, these have different issues. You know, when you're dealing with somebody who's got, you know, who's really afflicted with trauma and suffering from it in a daily life, the outer person is like often angry, tired, you know, like just, would you please, you know, the relationship of the outer person to the inner parts is like, would you please stop this? Would you just go away and leave me alone and let me live my life? you know, because the outer person is basically aware in many cases that feelings are arising which are not in the present and are not helping. They're freezing up in situations where they don't want to, or they're being too aggressive or whatever. All right. And I think it's really important to understand that the energy psychology itself will work better if you are splitting the parts out like this, because the outer person needs to tap on, even though I'm really furious at this part of me and I wish to hell, and even so, I deeply love and fully accept myself. Then the part is tapping on, even though I got clobbered at 6 and I'm scared shitless, and even so, I deeply love and fully accept myself. They're not tapping on the same thing. And if you do muscle testing on them, you will find out they don't muscle test the same way, which is part of the reason I distrust a lot of people who just sit a person down and start muscle testing and say, well, the body says this. Well, we don't know what persona in the body happens to be answering. And for some people, it may not matter, but for the kind of clients I deal with, it does matter. Okay, how much sense are we making here?
It's good.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Okay. All right, now, this is a heavy-duty slide because it's got all of my guidelines for setting up, whether it's a bulky or a slim constellation. You want to somehow capture the tension in a situation, in a family, a person, or whatever. If you set up a constellation, it's got, you know, the client, father, mother, brother, or whatever. Unless they are enemies or somehow, you know, like where's the tension here? Most of the time I will try to set up a goal. Like, what does the client want? Because the goal is the goal, and the goal is that which we are after. The desired positive change is what we're after. And that energizes the whole thing. You can feel into the goal, and the goal will sit there and look at this family and say, there's no way I'm going to exist in this family as it is right now. Forget it. And that's what you want to see. Do you understand me? Because the goal can't exist in this family system the way this family system is, because the client can't achieve it and without, you know, stepping out of this system completely or somehow changing it.
When I was a child, I felt that I shouldn't have been there. And a couple of years ago, my brother actually said to me that he felt that he shouldn't have been there. And I didn't know he was thinking that, and he didn't know I was thinking that. So if we ended up in a constellation with our family, we would both be feeling that we shouldn't really be there.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand. It's unfortunate, but a lot of us, well, it's not my problem. My problem was different, but a lot of people, a lot of children feel that. Typically, children born late, you know, some child pops out 12 years after the other kids, and feels like an accident, and it changes mom and dad's life for another 20 years. Stuff like this. Keep it small. Don't subdivide any more than you need to. I treat everything as people. I personify everything. So regardless of what it is, if it's the goal, if it's a problem, whatever it is, you know, we feel into it as if it was a person. I am very big on ritual. You'll see that in a minute. I think setting up in space is really important. Space is magic. Space is a big deal. So I could have a client sit in the same chair and be the three different parts of the self, and I never will do that. I want that change in physical perspective. It's important. I want to ground these parts in that physical difference of sitting in a different chair. And where I'm trying to go with that really is I want the client and these sub parts, these inner family parts, I want them to be able to talk to one another in daily life. I want the outer client to be able to realize, you know, that's John. That's my 8-year-old. Or that's the survivor of this trauma, Harry, or whatever we call him. Because as they get to recognize each other and treat each other with respect as people, all right, they start to work their stuff out and they become able to make compromises, and what the inner parts need isn't intruding into daily life in damaging ways. We automatically repress the overwhelming feelings that we can look at as these inner personality parts, because they're overwhelming and they prevented us from functioning when they happened. Okay, whether it's a single event or whether it's a pattern-based situation where over and over again we had the same impossible situation in milder form. No, I got lost. My train of thought stopped there. Made the sentence too long. Don't make your sentences too long. All right. Anyway, space is important. You wanna teach respect. I mean, the idea is to be able to get the outer person to respect these inner feelings of overwhelm and make deals with them. Like, we'll let you out in certain situations when it's safe and when it's quiet, and I will pay attention to you, and we will help you, and we will get you out of this time trap that you're locked in, because they don't know it's over. They do not know it's over. Your goal is to speak the secrets, all right, to make the covert overt, and to midwife resolutions. Now that's a huge amount of stuff in a few outlines. So let's look a little more in detail at some of it. So this business about capturing the tension. One possible setup here might be pets versus owner. So we might put something on the floor for the pets and something for the owner. I don't feel that would quite be the best way to do this one. I would tend to set up 3 different parts here, because the 3 of them are sort of all seem to be going in different directions, and the real conflict here seems to have 3 parts and not 2. Am I making sense? Now this is just a very simple example, but it is an example. Maybe mom forces dad to walk the dogs, and who gets upset, and then that affects the dogs. So maybe mom is part of the central conflict here too. We don't know, but we would find that out, right? We would find that out if I won't say how we would find that out, but in a workshop, we would find that out by looking at the fact that something seemed to be missing and querying the client and stuff like this. That makes sense, people, right? Linda, does that make sense?
Yes, I just have a question. If
That's
you could
great.
back up a bit.
Yes.
The pets were previously representing ages of our inner parts.
Yeah.
What would be the presenting issue as a possibility? Oh, it was the sexually abused. Okay.
For this one. I mean, the presenting issue there was that this woman who was a very talented and beautiful and large woman had abusive relationships all the time, and actually had gotten in fistfights with men and gotten beaten up. And she was a lovely woman, and she didn't know how to carry her beauty, and it attracted all the wrong things to her. And I think I said this last time, I mean, I was just overjoyed when she learned to turn that around and wrap her boss around her little finger.
Right, now I remember. It's amazing what you forget in 2 weeks.
I just loved that. I was so proud and happy when I heard that. Because that's what she should be able to do, you know. I don't know about what's politically correct or what isn't, but you know, she absolutely reversed that situation, and I just thought that was so cool. And that was just such a sign that, you know, we really were healing this stuff. Because before, you can see the dynamic. I mean, the 6-year-old has been abused, and the 14-year-old is furious and overly angry. So the abused one is going to attract abuse, and the post-puberty one is going to pick fights around it, right? And that's a recipe for most of the relationships that she had. Okay. So here's some more of this distillation of stuff. I find these 4 things very, very interesting. And they cut against almost so much of what we've been taught to do. I think you can personify anything, and it's valuable to do so. I don't care if it's your car, your handkerchief, your refrigerator, your job. I don't care what it is. You can have a useful and productive relationship with it if you personify it. You can talk to it in strange, often symbolic ways. It will talk back to you. Now, shamans, and that's my belief, animism, shamans believe this is all alive and conscious anyway. So who am I to say that the divine energy can't flow personhood into a fork? Or can't make the fork an expression of this larger intelligence? More and more, I'm reading a lot right now about, I just came back from the Society for Scientific Exploration conference at Yale. And there's an awful lot going on about the fact that, more and more it seems clear that all the evidence, which the mainstream refuses to look at, points to the fact that your physical brain is simply some kind of receiver and transmitter for a mind that does not exist inside that brain. It needs that brain, but there are cases where people have been brain dead, or they have nothing in their head and they still are doing stuff. So there's so much going on that says basically that the universe around us is intelligent and conscious. Different levels of consciousness, yes, different kinds, but we're probably moving into a time when instead of saying little lumps come first, little lumps bumping, that's the universe, lumps bumping, molecules and atoms doing their thing. Where that comes first, and we try to explain consciousness on the basis of that, which we cannot do. We're moving into a time where we say consciousness comes first, and the lumps bumping is just a, manifestation of something that consciousness is doing. Anyway, you can personify anything. So why do I think that works? One very interesting point, I think, if you read Dan Siegel or other social neurobiologists, your social empathy system is working. It's the first thing that works. It works this subconscious social empathy thing works way before intelligence gets going or language. So that means probably a little kid starts out seeing everything as a person, because personhood is what's built in already. Do you understand me? The first job of a tiny little baby organism, a human, is look for persons out there, mom in particular, right? So probably the truth is everything is a person, and it's only later that we start to distinguish out objects and places, and you know what I mean, that we get this world permanence thing going where there's a stable space that we're in. But if everything starts out as a person, well, first of all, that starts to explain why kids have trees as friends, and or if there's, in some cases, they're seeing spirits and things like this that we've taught ourselves not to see. So I think it's very powerful. You know, personhood is like space. Personhood is a primary category in here. When you make something a person, this is a little person, I act towards it with certain kinds of respect. I'm grateful for the service it gives to me, et cetera, and so on. And I do feel this way about my cars, my boats, my guitars, for God's sake, yes. My guitars get nervous when I'm nervous. They won't stay tuned. When I go to some new place, until I calm down, the guitar won't calm down. That's good. My cars take care of me. So this is the exact opposite of what science is telling us, because science is telling us that this is the pathetic fallacy. And I love that term, because pathetic means a failure of feeling. It doesn't, you know, pathetic means two things. One, what they mean it to mean is the fallacy of attributing feelings, human-like characteristics, to things outside ourselves. But pathetic also means worthless, stupid, bad. And that, of course, is how scientists think of it. But the truth is, this is the oldest and most widespread worldview on the planet. So that's personify anything. Anchor was personified in space. Spatial relationships are some kind of primary metaphor for coding all sorts of things, especially social relations. You remember we did one of these sessions on the meanings of spaces around the body, and this is just a drop in the bucket here, right? I mean, there's way more than just this. There's a guy named Lucas Dirks who's written a book called Social Panoramas. That's a whole form of therapy that's based entirely on going into mental image space and looking at where goals, blocks, and people show up in the space around you, in this inner space, and accomplishing changes in your worldview and in the world around you simply by changing the relationships inside this space here. This is built a lot on neurolinguistic programming. But space is important. How do people, you know, these memory champions, you know, these guys who can memorize 80-digit numbers in a flash and you know, the way that most of them do this is they build what's called a memory palace. They envision a place like my living room or something. And the way they memorize these things is they put this one on the mantle, and then they put this one over in the middle of the mantle. They put this one here. And they literally, when they recall it, they march through their memory palace and find the things where they put them. That's how these champions that can, you know, memorize the order of a deck of cards, and I don't know. I mean, they have these contests. You probably know what I mean. Space is a big deal. So again, I don't want a client sitting in the same chair, being the three different people. I want them in a different place. So I'm essentially doing a small constellation. I'm doing a slim constellation. Sometimes I might want them standing up and moving around in a space, because they can express things with their body that they won't necessarily talk about. They can turn their back or something. And maybe we'll find out later what that means, but it's not something that would come out in words right away. How are we doing? Questions, comments? Okay. Number 3 is a big one. It really comes very much out of shamanism, and it's one of the ones that, you know, it can take me 2 or 3 sessions with a new client to get them into the ritual of switching chairs, taking a deep breath, and speaking in the first person. So what'll happen in the first session is I'll say, okay, well, please go over here and be your 6-year-old. And they'll go over there and sit there, and I'll take a deep breath. And then I'll start saying, well, he feels this and he does that. And I'll stop them and I'd say, no, please speak as that being. Be that person, right? This is what we do representing in group constellations, and this is what we tell people to do when we're doing tabletop or room-based constellations with a single person, is go be that person. Stand there next to that object, become that person, feel into, you know, check your body first, see what your body does, then look for feelings, and then look around and see how you react to other elements of the constellation. But you are dad. You're not over there talking to dad. This is really important. So the children can do this very easily. Kids games, right? I tell people it's a kids game. Let's pretend. Just go and pretend that you're mom. Please, go pretend you're mom. And in doing that, you know, they're forced to trade places, right? And something, you know, not only do they tend to start seeing things from mom's perspective, but oftentimes they will hook up psychically with stuff, and big things will happen. But it's a child's game. It's my native teachers were, you know, they were very simple. It was so simple that it was very hard to believe. You know, like, you don't have power, you have friends in the spirit world. Ask your friends for help. Don't try to get power. This is my teachers talking. Don't try to get power. You kind of don't want that. You want friends in the spirit world. And you want your personal power, of course, but you don't want to be able to make it rain. You want to be able to ask the clouds for rain and have them be your friend and give it to you. That's much richer. When you have friends, there's a larger intelligence than your own that's operating. Do you understand me? You get into less trouble. It's not just you and your ego. So anyway, cultivate childlike openness. Now, what have I said about that down here? Yeah, okay, just kind of the stuff I'm saying. children are very open-minded about how they learn. Well, you've seen children play dolls, play games with the cars and things. It's funny because I stopped doing that very early. I could build stuff, but I got bored playing with it. My brothers and younger brothers and sister would, we would build some little town-like thingy or something. Once we were finished building it, I lost interest, but they would play all these games with it. They would drive cars through the buildings and so on and so forth. Anyway, this openness, this childlike openness is a big deal. And a big key here is avoiding premature closure. Like, don't judge too quickly. The way that I think about this is I'm just walking around, I'm filling my basket with potential meanings just like they were flowers or something. I'm not trying to make a bouquet yet. I'm going to wait and see. I've got a pretty flower here and some ones over here, and we've got 3 red ones and yellow, and then we'll take the basket and we'll see what kind of bouquets want to emerge. And then maybe after we start building some bouquets, we'll go back and pick a few more flowers too. That's the way a constellation works, I think. That's a really good way for it to work. Because it keeps you from deciding what's going on too quickly. Honestly, I found myself at least an hour into a 2-hour private constellation last week. And I could kind of see what was going on, but I had no idea what the hell to do. I had no idea whatsoever. And I'm used to that. And at a certain point, it just all popped into place, just boom. All of a sudden, it was obvious. Do this, do that, try this, experiment with that, see what happens. Okay, and then this one here. Expect to find family in all human groups. Family is the basic survival-oriented collective of the human species. So whether you're talking about someone's inner personality parts, or you're talking about a big organization, they are all going to act like families. Someplace in there you're going to find families. If you go to a big corporation, you're going to find that the major players have their family problems. And they are seeing in other parts of the organization representatives of this or that family problem. And they're behaving in irrational ways towards this or that, or unhelpful ways towards this or that part of the business because it reminds them of their family problem. And in business coaching, it takes sometimes a long time to get some executive to the point where they'll see that. But it's the truth. It's family. Let me see what I said about that one. I think after we figure out, what's mom as kids, right? I mean, we got all these, look, we got noises coming in. We got tactile stuff going on. We got this thing wiggling that we don't know how to control, right? We got that. I don't know this part of me. Oh, I did this. It did this. And I don't really know. I haven't really quite figured out yet that, oh, that's me doing this to me. That's my arm. I can make it do X. The next thing that we figure out after we figure out mom is dad and family. Well, and there you are down at the bottom. Parental figures emerge, sibling rivalries come out. People find niches that often match those they had in their own family. bad boy, cute child, nurturer, instigator. Business departments become sibling rivals. The owner becomes dad or mom or... All right. So that's this stuff. That's kind of what I've put together. This that, and that's a look at how I work. I do a lot of, not doing much in the way of workshops right now. I do a lot of work with clients that involves private sessions, constellations. You know, if somebody's in ongoing work with me, there'll be a constellation every 6 weeks to 2 months maybe. And then there'll be inner family or other kinds of work in the meantime. And it just sort of peels back. We'll do a constellation and we'll let that sit a while and try to, you know, do practical work to solve the problem with the family or the problem with the job. Do the energy psychology or shamanism to deal with certain kinds of blocks and issues or attachments or whatever. And then at a certain point, we'll go back and do more with the family. Usually we know what to do with the family next because of the work that we did with the individual. But that's very much the way I work. And I am using, I think it's interesting and important that the breaking out, even if you're just working with an individual, breaking out the inner family, which is a baby constellation, it actually helps energy psychology work better. Because the parts have different feelings and they muscle test differently. All right? So helping them, you know, personifying them, externalizing them in the different chairs, getting the client used to saying, that's this part of me. I know who that is. I have a relationship with that part of me. I can talk to that part of me. Do you follow me? That just becomes really huge. And it doesn't take that long to get it going. It just takes some, you know, speak in the first person, to switch chairs. Don't tell me what the other one thinks. Go over there and say it. It may seem stupid to you, but you'll see in a few weeks you will really be able to have these conversations in your mind when you need them. You'll be able to see, oh, that's so-and-so right now that's kind of freezing me up here. All right. Can you back off a little bit and let us get through this, and then I'll help you afterwards. Those are hugely valuable things to be able to do. So the constellation, the breaking out of different parts of the system, I think it really helps energy psychology. And alternatively, I think that there's a lot of personal trauma in the world. Ancestral trauma often breeds or spawns personal trauma. So I don't want to be without decent tools to work with personal trauma as well. Not everything is a constellation. So, and we come there to, what are we doing? We're trying to get the internal family system to be coherent. So to me, this all just kind of comes into one big picture where both the energy psychology, and I mean, there could be other forms of, other ways of working on personal trauma too. I mean, it could be somatic experiencing, except that's just too slow. I don't have that. That is a very beautiful, painstaking, careful method of resourcing someone into their, noticing what their body is doing, and it's lovely, but you got to have a lot of money to do it. You got to have money to learn it, and you got to be able to charge a bunch of money to do it. And I can't do it. I don't have that kind of. I'm not a licensed person in getting paid by insurance. You know. But the fact that they both measurably improve each other, I think that's great. So that's the stuff. I'm going to stop there, and it's up to you guys if you have anything you want to say or not, or whatever. Or I could ask Sandy to say something. That would be, I don't know if she's still there. Oh, she's still there. Yeah, go ahead, hon.
I was just thinking I would love to see this workshops that you've been recording. They're on your website, are they, Michael?
When you say workshops, what do you mean?
Well, what we've been doing in all these family energetics meetings.
Well, all these meetings are on the web.
That's what I mean. But I mean, you're recording them so I can see them again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where are they, Sandy?
I'll put the link in the chat thingy.
No, you know where they are. They're on the Family Energetics page on either our new website or our old one.
Okay.
Okay, that's something I could do here. No. Yeah, let's do this. Let's see. So this is our new, assuming it works. Come on. This browser, I go crazy with this thing looking at that stupid little pinwheel. We're waiting on the pinwheel now, folks. Maybe after a while it'll stop spinning that little thing. I already don't want the New York Times. Okay, this is our new mobile-friendly website. What that means is that even if you're on your cell phone, it does the right things. It just, there, see, that's what it looks like on your cell phone. Aren't you impressed?
Yes.
Took us god-awful many months to get this thing built. And then we can't get rid of the old other website. So we've now got ReadyWorks More, which is the old website, which has much more stuff on it, but it's not mobile friendly, and Google is not finding it on the search engines anymore and everything. So we've had to make this big change. But anyway, we're very proud of this. It took us forever to, come on, please, please. There it is. You see what I'm living with here in this machine. Anyway, it's got some stuff on it, and it's pretty, and etc. and so on. It's got some nice stuff on trauma. Okay. So I'm done unless you have questions and comments. This is the last one of our free evenings until the fall. And I now go into hibernation and do clients rest a little bit. Sandy and I figure out what our next goals are. I think I probably need to get a couple of new courses together. We'll see.
Have you thought any more about what I said last time about when people interbreed and then they produce a child? Do you remember?
Can you help me, please? People in what?
You know, when a child is born out of the result of people interbreeding. And I said that perhaps there's more layers for that child. Have you thought any more about that?
Actually, no, I haven't, but I think you're right that there's more.
That there would be more layers, you think?
Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, all other things being equal, yeah.
Yeah. It's only something I'm curious about. It hasn't happened in my family. Not to my knowledge, anyway.
All righty. Red, are you gone? You may be gone.
No, I'm not. Been here. Just
Oh.
had to do my kind of work day going on. So I was listening intently and enjoying it very much.
All righty.
Thank
Well,
you.
Thanks for bringing us Hawaii. And thank you guys for being here. And we'll see you again maybe in a couple of months.
Thank you,
Thanks
Michael.
for-
It's been very
Thank you,
good.
Michael. Thank you,
Thank
Sandy.
you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Good
All right,
night, good
Sandy.
afternoon, good morning.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good
Yeah,
night.
that's right. What do we got? Boy, we got